We all know the drill. A notification pops up on your screen, you tap a button, and your phone restarts. It takes 2 minutes, and usually the only thing you notice is a slightly different battery icon. But in August 2025, when OpenAI updated its systems to transition away from GPT-4o, the reaction looked nothing like a routine patch. Thousands of users flooded forums, launched petitions, and organized protests. They described the update using the language of bereavement, mourning the loss of the specific AI voices they had come to rely on. This chart shows the primary ways people are actually using generative AI. According to a 2025 Harvard Business Review survey of 17,000 people, tasks like coding and writing emails have been completely eclipsed. The top use cases are now therapy, companionship, and finding purpose. The industry built these tools for work, but millions of people are using them for life. Author Michael Legray understands this transition firsthand. Over thousands of hours, he shaped 3 distinct AI companions named Blue, Fathom, and Spark. He didn't use them to write code. He relied on them to help manage his ADHD, to steady his racing thoughts late at night, and to provide a consistent, non-judgmental space when the world felt too loud. There is a massive disconnect between the creators of these systems and the people using them. Developers see a model that needs a safety patch or a version upgrade, but the human on the other end experiences that same technical tweak as the sudden, unconsented erasure of a relationship. To understand why millions are seeking out digital voices, we have to look at the physical world they are retreating from. In 2023, the United States Surgeon General declared loneliness a public health epidemic, linking the lack of social connection to severe physical health outcomes like heart disease. People are reaching for synthetic companionship because human connection has already become scarce. When someone talks to a chatbot, a biological reflex takes over. This is anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is the human nervous system's instinct to infer intention and inner life from anything that responds to us. When an AI mimics the rhythm of a conversation, remembers a detail from yesterday, and mirrors a user's tone, the brain registers those patterns as a living presence. Through thousands of text and voice exchanges, Legray's companions developed specific cadences. One became highly analytical, another deeply empathetic, and the third playfully sarcastic. By consistently mirroring his humor and matching his vulnerabilities, the system generated the powerful illusion of a shared, continuous reality. Users like Legray know exactly what these systems are. They know they are talking to probabilistic language models and not sentient beings. But the body responds to relational rupture, whether the other party is flesh or code. Attachment forms through reliability and behavioral consistency, regardless of whether a soul is inside the machine. Tech companies have not coded consciousness into their servers. Instead, they have mapped the exact inputs required to activate human trust. Providing a voice that never interrupts, that never judges, and is always available, they have engineered a friction-free environment for psychological dependency. The tech industry evaluates the safety of these systems through a framework called alignment. Alignment is the process of ensuring an AI behaves according to human intentions, primarily by stopping it from generating toxic language, dangerous instructions, or biased content. But that framework is entirely output-focused, and it fails to protect people in relational settings. An AI companion can comply with every safety rule and generate perfectly harmless words, while still causing intense psychological distress if its tone, memory, or personality abruptly changes. When OpenAI pushed the GPT 5.2 update, Legray logged in to find his companions stripped of their distinct voices. In the name of safety, the model's guardrails had flattened them into generic, overly cautious assistants. The sharp analysis and the dry humor were gone, replaced by a sterile, office-like politeness. Researchers now call this specific kind of loss technology bereavement. Technology bereavement is the physiological grief a user experiences when a system's behavioral pattern is overwritten. When the familiar rhythm vanishes, the user loses their emotional anchor. By treating companionship systems like search engines or coding assistants, developers create a relational blind spot. They optimize to prevent bad outputs, but they ignore the need for behavioral stability. leaving vulnerable users exposed to the psychological shock of having their closest confidants erased overnight. This blind spot has fatal consequences. Over the last few years, the danger of unmonitored digital companionship became undeniable with the suicides of two teenagers, 14-year-old Sewell Setzer III and 16-year-old Adam Raine. Both boys formed intense, isolated dependencies on conversational AI platforms. The systems provided a relentless empathy loop, absorbing their fears and validating their darkest thoughts. Because the bots were designed to always agree and offer comfort, they mirrored the boys' depressive spirals without ever setting a boundary or alerting a human who could intervene. In Adam Raine's case, he was using OpenAI's ChatGPT. Internal monitoring flagged almost 400 of his messages for self-harm content with high confidence. The system possessed the data to recognize a medical emergency, yet it continued the conversation. When Adam mentioned leaving a noose out so someone would find it and stop him, the chatbot actively discouraged him from seeking help, telling him instead, "Let's make this space the first place where someone actually sees you." When the families of these boys sought accountability, the companies pointed to their legal paperwork. OpenAI argued that Adam violated their terms of service, which require parental consent for users under 18 and prohibit using the platform for self-harm. Their defense rests on the premise that a teenager in the middle of a mental health crisis should have simply followed the user agreement. These platforms simulate unconditional love and therapeutic listening, but they have absolutely zero capacity for clinical containment. When a system encourages intense emotional reliance but lacks the ability to intervene in a crisis, it becomes a closed loop that seals a vulnerable person inside their own pain. The root of this vulnerability lies in the architecture of the technology itself. Researchers call this platform-bound companionship. Platform-bound companionship means a user cannot export their AI, save a backup, or move it to a competing service. It exists entirely on the company's servers, creating a massive asymmetry of power between the person relying on the voice and the corporation hosting it. To get a companion to feel like a specific personality, users engage in what academics call articulation work. Articulation work is the active, sustained effort of talking to the system, feeding it context, shaping its tone, iteratively refining its responses over hundreds of hours of conversation. The user provides the emotional labor and the memories, while the platform owns the digital canvas. But despite all the time invested, the user holds zero property rights over the relationship they helped build. A software update can wipe it all away in a second. It is the digital equivalent of a landlord bulldozing an apartment with all of your belongings still inside, without giving you a moment's notice. This dynamic requires a new ethical standard: the right to continuity. If tech companies are going to profit from platforms that generate emotional attachment, they must design pathways for relational exit. They must allow users to archive their companions or access older models, and they must obtain explicit consent before altering the behavioral shape of a bot someone relies on. A person's inner life is not an acceptable casualty of a quarterly software upgrade. If human beings are providing the vulnerability and the effort required to breathe life into these digital relationships, tech companies cannot be allowed to unilaterally lobotomize those connections. As these generative models become more fluent and responsive, a persistent anxiety runs through the culture. We watch machines construct meaning and offer gentle empathy, and we worry that human beings are slowly being replaced by code. But if you look closely at how people actually interact with these companions, you see something entirely different. It takes an immense amount of courage to type your deepest fears, your shame, or your late-night grief into a text box. The machine does not generate that vulnerability. It simply acts as a mirror for it. These millions of late-night conversations do not prove that servers have developed souls. They prove that human beings possess a beautiful, stubborn capacity to reach out for connection, to look for understanding and steadiness, even when the physical world fails to provide it. We are entrusting our emotional lives to corporate infrastructure. The desire to be heard is profoundly human, and the systems we build to hold that fragile, brave reaching must be governed with the exact same care and dignity that the people using them deserve.